Motherhood. 1 minute, you're mom of the year.
I love you, Mommy.
Then the next, not so much. From bath time to bullying, from potty training to puberty, parenting is full of challenges. But one thing is for certain, you are not alone. Welcome to Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, author, mother, parenting expert, Tara Clark. Join me while we tackle today's modern mom problems. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited for you to be here. We're going to talk about all the things because with having ADHD, we do talk about all of the things. All of the things. They may not necessarily finish, like all of those topics may not be. I could go into like 30 different conversations simultaneously, but I'm still also following along with those conversations.
Always. Yeah.
And so this may or may not be like that. So you have a new limited series podcast out right now. It is called Climbing the Walls. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Climbing the Walls came from, I was diagnosed with ADHD about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And when I was diagnosed, I was 36, about to turn 37. And even in my first appointment, like the first time I really talked to my therapist about the possibility, she said, I want you to read a few of these articles. You'll see so many women have been diagnosed. And one of the articles I read mentioned that diagnosis rates actually, I don't think the data was out yet, but there were several articles and they were mentioning this rise in diagnosis among women. We soon found out that diagnosis rates of women nearly doubled during the pandemic, according to the CDC. So my question was just like, why so many women? And why are we only recognizing it now? Like what's happening in this moment that is making it clear, or is that's leading to doctors diagnosing it? And understood.org gave me the opportunity to ask those questions more formally, if you will. And it turned into a 6-part series that really attempts to answer those questions that I had from day one, which is just why now, why so many women, and also just how did we miss this in an entire generation of women and kind of every generation that came before us.
Yeah, no, well, let's unpack that. I mean, yeah. Well, I know it takes you 6 episodes to get to that point, but can you give me the top line on why you think that is? Is it just because we are now going to the doctors and saying, doctor, I have this, and this constellation of symptoms, if you will. Can you make sense of this? Is that more or less what it is?
I want to think so. I went into it sort of thinking that, right? That there's more information out there, whether it's through TikTok or Instagram, or just there's more information reaching more people. So more people are seeking a diagnosis. But even in the last, I was reporting for about a year. And even in the course of reporting, I met women who in the last year or two have recognized their symptoms, gone to a doctor, and been completely dismissed. So I think that I have a hard time boiling it down to just one answer, because I think that that's actually been the challenge, is that there's so many answers. And that's how we ended up with 6 episodes, because, there's questions about overdiagnosis. There's questions about underdiagnosis. There's questions about just if something exists in the absence of research. And, at what point does a collection, when there's a groundswell of women reporting the same experience, but science hasn't, the agencies that fund scientific study have not yet dedicated money to these experiences, then what can we say about them officially? So I think that there's sort of several factors that really came to a head all at once during the pandemic. And the pandemic itself was a huge factor in how this happened. So I wish I had a clean answer to it, right? Like I've been trying to figure out what my clean answer is, but I'm like, sort of why I thought it could even carry a multi-episode podcast. Because it was like, what is the answer here? And some of the answers, like very early on in the show, some of the answers that I heard, because when I was first diagnosed, I kept hearing, well, we just didn't know how it affects women. And that's just not true. That's just, right. I think that by the end of episode 1, you really understand that I'm like, it's not that we didn't know, it's that we didn't listen to the people who were telling us. And that, that's true of so much in women's health, but that's sort of the starting point, and then we keep going from there.
Right. That really is our jumping off point.
Yeah.
So I have like so many questions for you on this. What led you to go in and formally get a diagnosis versus just saying, I've lived like this for 36 years. This just must be my temperament?
It's such a great question. There's a specific thing that I learned about rejection sensitivity, and it just like alarm bells went off in my head as I first read about rejection sensitivity, because I was reading about a very specific experience, if you will, that I had just had. But what really led me, I think the question I'm answering is slightly different from what you asked, right? Because it's like what led me to actually pursue the diagnosis and pursue treatment versus saying, okay, yeah, this does sound like me, but I've always been this way. I've survived 36 years. I can probably keep going. What led me to seek the diagnosis and treatment was really being somewhat hyper aware that I wanted to have kids. And when you read about ADHD, they say three of the hardest things for women are, or three of the areas in your life where it shows up the most is career, relationships, and parenting. And at 36, it felt a little bit late. Like I was sort of mourning what could have been different in my career had I known and been treated. I was also sort of mourning or considering what might have been different had I known when it came to relationships. And I was like, I haven't started parenting yet. It's a thing I want to do. So if I actually address this, and I later learned, or in the course of this learned, that people with ADHD tend to need really serious motivation, and then you can sort of do anything. And that was enough of a motivating factor for me, because I was also like, I'm not going to like get a diagnosis and be treated and be kind of on a road to living really easily overnight. It's going to take time. So it was like, I wasn't ready to have a kid the next day, but I knew that by the time I had a kid, I would, if that happened for me, I would want to be aware of my ADHD and having it, just how to live with it in an easier way, if you will.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I love that you broke it down between those three things with the relationships, career, and parenting, because that really is so true. I mean, many times, I'll just take career for a second. Many times the ADHD is the superpower. That is sort of what gives you a leg up. Do you think has that been your experience?
I think it's definitely been, I think yes and no. Like, and I think it's like, tough to put it in like the black and white boxes because
of course, everything's
like,
nuanced.
Everything's nuanced, yeah. Right? But I think that for me, especially as someone who's pursuing journalism, it's the perfect thing for me. Like it gave me, with ADHD, I get incredibly interested in something, and within 5 months or a year, I want to move on. And that's how journalism works, right? You write a story, especially when I was younger, it was like, oh, I have to work on this for 1 week and then I'll move on to the next story. That's amazing. And I'll have like, exactly. And like, it also eliminates small talk. There's not much small talk in journalism, right? Because it's always interviews and there's deadlines. So I'm always motivated because I'm going to hit my deadlines. But I also think that it, when I learned more about the emotional regulation or the some of the issues that come up with, especially when you're trying to work in a workplace that wants things to function along what we'll call a neurotypical process. I guess I don't know how else to describe it, but there were a lot of ways where it was like, almost like the interactions I was having with some coworkers who maybe didn't seem like they were carrying their weight, but maybe that was just my opinion. I don't know. But either way, it was a superpower and also maybe a detriment at times, emotionally, I would say.
Right. And then going back to the rejection issue too, like that probably weighed so heavy on you anytime that you felt rejection at work.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've learned rejection sensitivity is typically, at least in a lot of the reading that I've done, it has to do with like these big moments. So especially like during a breakup or during maybe a job rejection, but if it's something that you like it might be this sudden rage in the face of perceived loss of love is one description that I've seen. So it's not necessarily like, I think I have a somewhat thick skin towards everyday rejection, but I also, someone had asked me about this recently and I was saying, I really didn't have a hard time pitching freelance stories because I'm so much more confident in work. Whereas when it comes to dating, I wasn't really putting myself out there in ways that people maybe thought you should, because the rejection felt so, I was just like, I will avoid it at all costs. So yeah, luckily rejection sensitivity didn't affect me too much at work, but there were definitely ways where it was like, if I wasn't getting a project that I really wanted, yeah, I was definitely sensitive to that rejection. But somehow the confidence helped overcome some of the sensitivity career wise. Luckily.
Yeah. No, luckily.
Yeah.
No, that's a very good
Yeah.
thing. So you are a mother now.
No, I'm 21 weeks today. So I'm halfway through a pregnancy.
Oh my
You can
God.
probably see that I would normally have moved the crib, but I was like, well, for this interview, I can leave the unbuilt crib behind me because
you leave it right where it is, my friend.
I'm just going to leave it all right where it is.
Okay. I want to talk about your motherhood journey so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I said, I got the diagnosis sort of with this in mind. And I hate to say this, ADHD does come into it in that the more I learned about the challenges of that ADHD women tend to have in relationships, the more I was like, I don't think I have time to figure this out, to meet someone, figure it out with them, and get pregnant before my body's potentially not going to be capable of getting pregnant anymore. So the journey really started with I just started with testing to see like what is my fertility looking like. It was not what I expected. Like the numbers that were lower than I expected, and it became this like, do it right now, or you can't do it, and that was overwhelming and not something I could really handle. So I actually put it all on pause for about 8 months. There was an extra element to all of this, where ADHD really comes in, which was that. And I wrote an article about this for The Guardian, but sperm donors were selling out during the pandemic. And it became incredibly difficult to even like this step of the process that I was like, this part will be regulated and easy was not easy. So staying on task with it all was really something. But I think there was like 6 months where I was trying IUIs, which is a less invasive form. And then this September, I tried IVF for the first time, and I kept switching doctors, and it was just like the hardest thing I've ever managed. But again, that the deadlines and the motivation helped a lot. And I did IVF finally I tried it in September, and I don't know how much you know about IVF, but basically I did an entire round of medications and they didn't work at all. And it was like, you went in for your first scan and the doctor was like, you have 2 follicles and you've paid $29,000 for all of this. Like I just sat there and I was like, talk about rejection. Like I felt like I was being rejected by a thing that didn't even exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, I don't even know. Like, yeah, I don't know how to react to this. And I walked around in an absolute trance. Luckily, I had an acupuncture appointment that day with a fertility acupuncturist who I'd been seeing for 4 months. She even like comped the session because I was just so like, it was like anyway, she was wonderful. It's good to have a support system around you.
Yes.
And then by pure chance, and again, maybe I credit this to my ADHD, someone else mentioned another doctor the acupuncturist that day mentioned another doctor. And she was just like, why don't you just give it a shot because they canceled the cycle. They were like, there's no reason to even try a retrieval for 2 follicles. Like it just seemed like my body wasn't reacting. So anyway, fast forward, I switched doctors. The new doctor had a grant through New York State. Like everything worked out in a way that was unbelievable. And it just worked. And now I have, 4 embryos frozen and a baby growing, I guess. I'm like, I don't even know how to describe these things. But so it worked. So I'm due in late August. And it's funny. I'm like, I haven't told everyone yet, but this is maybe how I'm going to tell people. Yeah.
Oh, that is so exciting. Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, more people go through, whether it's infertility or challenging journeys to become parents more than you think that they do. And I'm so glad that people like you have a platform to be able to talk about it. People like me that we're able to speak about it. So thank you for sharing that story. I understand about IUI because that's actually how we had my son. And it was the last round of IUI before we would have had to go to IVF, and it worked, and we had him, and he's 12 years old now. And so it's amazing. So, yeah.
I was so scared. I was trying IUI because I was honestly so scared of forgetting medications with IVF and being told but I set more calendar reminders and times and everything. And I just sort of put my social life on hold. I was just like, I'll see you guys when I'm done with this. But I love that IUI. It's just, there's so many versions of how people get to parenthood. It's really amazing to start to realize it.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you were saying about sperm donors. I have friends down in Florida who, it's sort of a long story, but long story short, they were looking at sperm donors during the pandemic. And also it was hard because, like you said, they were tapped out from the banks, and they ended up using someone's ex-husband for their child. And now their child's big. So probably at least 3 years old now. So it's kind of just wild to think about that. But yeah, I totally went off on a different topic, but that's what happens. We're talking about women with ADHD, and it's okay. So stick with us. What are some systems that you'd use in your everyday life to help you keep on track? You mentioned alarms and reminders. What do you use? What's useful?
Yeah, I think calendar reminders for every little thing have become my go-to in a way that it sounds so obvious almost. But before I was diagnosed, it was just not something that I really did. I would just have paper to-do lists that I forgot about. And so I kind of finally bought into use my Google Calendar for absolutely everything. And then one of the biggest things for me was just finally assessing. I called it a life audit, which is maybe a really cheesy name I came up with because my parents are accountants. But that's this is a term that was always thrown around in my house. So, I called it a life audit. And I realized at one point, I know you said you also used to live in New York. I actually just marked, I didn't try and change my behaviors, but I just marked it and realized I had done things 17 nights in a row. And there were certain nights where I was doing 2 things. And I just realized I was trying to assess, when do I burn out and how much time do I need to recover? And can I actually minimize that recovery time by not being so burnt out? And that's really helped me. So I actually set, once I see that I have plans 2 or 3 nights in a row, I even mark it on my calendar, do not do anything tonight. So I would say, kind of just being aware of what my needs are in that sense. Also starting to treat working out not just as this is a thing so that I feel good and I like how I look. It's much more now about, I've done a lot of reading on ADHD and exercise, just physical activity and how it stimulates the brain. And that's become sort of my approach to, actually, especially during the pregnancy and during IVF. There's a lot of research, but not enough research on the effects of stimulants during pregnancy. And I think everyone has to make the choice that works for them. But the choice I made for myself was that I wouldn't take stimulants. So exercise has become I have to be up. I was up at 7 o'clock this morning on my Peloton. I was just I think of it as my medicine now. Because I'm I have to do this. It's just I think a lot of things have become part of my everyday, and I'm trying to remember what some of them are, but it sounds like such an obvious thing. But yeah, the biggest, I think, is the willingness to say no to doing stuff, because I'm so oh, there's a thing happening. Of course I want to come.
Yes.
And so learning to be I can't come. Is that same for you?
Oh, very, very much. I was in the city late last night for an event. It was someone's book launch. Tonight, I have another event to support somebody else. And luckily that one's in New Jersey and it's in my town. So I'm happy about that. But yes, in all last week, I was away at a conference. And so I need to set more boundaries for myself, but I always want to keep showing up for people. And I think that's something that I struggle with. That's a me problem. But it's interesting because in the book launch I went to last night, I'll just say it was Dr. Judith Joseph. She has a new book called High Functioning Depression. And in it, obviously, she was talking about different parts of it. And the whole point of the book is about like sparking joy and finding things that make you happy, right? That make you you. And the big tagline is be a human being, not a human doing. And it's a really good book. And in it, she's talking about how high functioning people always are busy. They're always preoccupied, like they're always occupying their time because they feel that if they don't, then maybe they're not worthy. They're not worthy of love, all of the things, right? You're trying to prove yourself, you're people pleasing, you're showing up for everybody, you're bending over backwards. And that is a very common thing amongst high functioning people. And so the book was all about that. And so that resonated with me. And I took those little nuggets with me last night, trying to be better about having downtime and not saying yes to everything and saying yes to everyone, because I do want to show up for people.
Yeah, it's even a lot of, I think, like parenting advice trickling into my life, even before the pregnancy, like even a couple of years ago, and seeing how often they're saying the best way to show up for your kids is to show up for yourself. Yes. And I sort of started applying that to everything. And I'm like, the best way for me to show up for my friends is to actually be able to fully show up when I do and not do things. I'm trying really hard to not do things halfway anymore and to really check in and say, do I really want to do this tonight? But then also saying, actually, like when it starts to be like, I haven't done anything in a few days and working from home now, sometimes I'm like, am I just being lazy? Like, so, like there's finding that balance, like which one is true. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, I think there definitely is a balance to that. Cause like, of course, every once in a while you want to stay home in your sweatpants and your hoodie and just watch a movie on Netflix. Right. And so I think you're allowed that. You're allowed to rest. Remember, you're a human being, not a human doing. So it's okay, Danielle. I know. Isn't that a great one? That's why I felt the need to say it again, because it really is important. And, going back to ADHD and motherhood, I mean, obviously your baby's not born yet, but you will see once she comes that you need a system in, especially newborn parenting, when you're thinking about feedings and sleep schedules and taking care of yourself and all of that kind of stuff. You're going to have to write as many notes as you can, as many reminders as you can. For me, I had postpartum anxiety with like a touch of postpartum OCD because I was worried about germs. I was worried about the cleanliness of bottles. I was worried about, is he eating enough and all of those things. And when he was born, I was pumping in addition to nursing, because when I was able to see how much milk was in the bottle and that I knew that's how much he was getting, that allayed my anxiety. And I think that is also related to, the ADHD and, like I said, the anxiety. And so that's just something, not that I'm trying to scare you, because trust me, I'm not trying to scare you. I just wanted to share that story because I was not anticipating that. I've always skewed more anxious than depressive, but I was not anticipating the levels of anxiety that I had once he was born for those, and I'm using this in quotes, simple, activities of daily living for him, the changing the diapers, the feeding, especially the feeding. The feeding was a really big thing for me. But yeah, it was a lot.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. That's definitely, I mean, that, and also like we have a lot of statistics now or we have data on the rates of postpartum anxiety and depression among women with ADHD. And being aware of that, I'm sort of just there's sort of this like anxiety about postpartum anxiety that I'm just trying to allay now. But luckily there's someone I speak to in the last episode of the podcast who's at the Duke Center for Girls and Women with ADHD. And they have a partnership with an organization. They're in North Carolina because they're at Duke, and they have a partnership with, I believe the organization typically supports, it's a postpartum support organization, like nonprofit, but they created the first group specifically for new moms with ADHD. So these resources are starting to exist.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. I mean, it's taken so long, but so I'm hoping that's really what comes from this huge rise in diagnosis of adult women, right? Is more resources for not just resources that are sort of a blanket for women, but for women at all different stages of life, including postpartum.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So my mother is technically undiagnosed, but she probably has some of the most severe ADHD that I've ever met, linked with generalized anxiety. And one time, this is years ago, I mean, it was probably 15 years ago, I was chatting with her saying like, I think that you have ADHD and like maybe you should go to the doctor. She was so mad at me for even suggesting something like that. And I was like, no, Mom, it's fine. Like, don't worry about it. Like maybe there's a treatment that could like, help you focus, this and that. She was so mad. And so I'm happy that people are talking about this to try to break the stigma around it. Now, I don't know if we're going to be breaking the stigma for the women in their 70s, and I hope we are. So that'd be wonderful if we can. But I think my mom growing up always just thought like, this is how I am and this is who I am. And I don't even know if she was as insightful as in self-aware. I know as the child of somebody who had severe ADHD, like I know what that was like. I had to keep her on track, wake her up in the morning to take me to school, all of those kind of now this is a separate podcast episode altogether, but I was the parent to my mother, and still to a certain degree, I still am. Not even to a certain, I am. I could just say it without any, preface to it. I still am. And that was always our dynamic is keeping her on track, making sure we had everything, making sure she has her keys and her glasses and her wallet and all of the things. And that didn't just happen now at 70. It was like that our entire lives. It was always like that. Right. Exactly. And she, would tell me when she used to get in trouble at school or at home with her family from her parents and all of those things. And it's interesting to be the child of someone with severe ADHD. Now, I like to think that mine is more like Diet Coke. It's like a much fainter, lighter version of that. And even with my son, not that I'm giving this all away, but at one point he had a neuropsych exam and they said that he scored just slightly under, to the point where they said, we're going to say it's not ADHD, but if you went to a different doctor with that diagnosis, they would say it is. So he was right on the cusp. And I feel like I'm also on that cusp. And that's why I say it's light versus where my mother's is much more severe. So I have experience. I'm like in a sandwich of it. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And I'm nodding so much because my mom, same thing, complete ADHD, the one difference I would say is that, I think my grandfather also had it. And my mom grew up she would say this too. This isn't just me sort of putting on rose tinted glasses, but she grew up completely free of criticism. Like my grandparents, I knew them very well.
That's amazing.
They were just, and
my mom was the exact opposite.
So my mom grew up in this sort of like, it was just all play. Like my grandfather would just take them out of school some days to just have fun. Like it was like rules weren't a problem in that house. And, but so then when I first floated the idea to her that I think she has it, when I first said it, she's like, no, you were so good at school. There's no way. And I was like, that's the first thing they almost always say to girls, I was like, you're following the script. And then over the course of the last 3 years, as I was finishing the podcast, actually, I called her and I was saying, I was having a hard time with the last episode and just figuring out, how to end the series. And, my mom probably could have been a character throughout the show because she went on this journey of completely dismissing, well, maybe your generation has this, but mine never did. There's nothing wrong with my brain. And then as I talked her through it and said, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your brain. I'm saying that we think differently, and really started using that language, she'll now be like, oh, well, because of my ADHD, I interrupt your father too much. Or she'll say things like that. And I'm like, this is the win for me. Like, yes, I wanted to make the series, but this is like, what a difference.
That's the win. That's the takeaway.
That's the win. And she has, I would say, hyperactivity. Like that has just never actually gone away. And like if I'm going on a trip, she wants to be on it with me. She wants to do everything we're doing. And when we were kids, it was amazing because there were 4 of us within, I mean, my sisters are 5.5 years apart. So she had 4 kids within 5.5 years. And my mom was, PTA president. She was in charge of everything you could possibly be in charge of, like Girl Scouts, PTA, softball coach, like all of it.
I understand.
And worked full time and never missed a soccer game, never missed. We all played 3 sports, like she was sort of this like super mom, but we also knew she was very different from other moms. Like there were ways in which she was almost like childlike because it was all enthusiasm. And now she's had my niece and nephew, she and my dad, but a lot of it's my mom, have had them 4 days a week. And she's like sad that they're now in school because she would prefer to have them around all the time.
Yeah.
And like I heard her talking to I was at my parents' house maybe a year or 2 ago, and she was talking to, like I came downstairs in the morning and there's like someone my age in the kitchen. And I realized her daughter's on a play date with my niece who's over at my parents' house. So I'm talking to the other mom and we're laughing about how my mom is now making friends with all of the mom. Like, it's just like this funny thing at the school. And it's all because of school pickup. And where I'm going with this. And so then anyway, my mom was describing how much, or Allie, the friend, was saying how it's amazing how much my mom always did because she's heard stories. Mm-hmm. And I started to say, don't let her fool you. And before I could even finish the sentence, my mom said, oh, it's just because I get bored. Like, it was like we were both at the same time saying, don't think she was doing it all for us. Like, she was very much doing it for herself. And I think when my sisters and I talk about becoming moms or like thinking about having kids, because one of my sisters has 2 kids, one of my sisters doesn't want to have kids. It's like, we all are like, but we can't be mom. No one can do as much as she did. But I also think, and now I'm sort of going on my own tangents as we all do, but like, I think about the way parenting was in the 80s and 90s and the way it is now. And so when I'm grappling with like having these fears of some of the, like I saw your list of the 10 modern mom problems, mm-hmm. I would say there's so much overlap almost to every point on that list of things that compound ADHD symptoms. Right? Like the 10 problems that you mentioned. I'm like, why is ADHD on the rise? Because look at, like, I'm not only talking about moms in ADHD rising, but look at the modern mom problems and you can see why ADHD is on the rise, quite frankly.
Right.
But like when our moms were moms or were young moms, I'm always like, my mom was in one place at a time. If she was coaching our softball game, she wasn't also expected to be in conversation with the soccer coach on a Facebook group and navigating like what to tell my dad to get from the grocery store. Like there was, she was doing one thing at a time. And ADHD brains can do that. But that's like not, it's just like almost if I could add anything to your list of modern mom problems, I would say it's like this expectation of availability that a person with ADHD wants to fulfill because you want to fulfill people's expectations. And I've reached a point where I'm like trying to get people used to the idea of me as a mom who's not available. And I'm like, because that's what I want to be. Like when I'm with my kid, I want to only be available to my kid. And I want my child to also know that when I'm not with them, I'm not necessarily 1,000% available to them. Right. It's like, it's such a difference. I'm like in awe of all of you who have figured it out, but I'm also like, how is this going to go? I don't know. That's like,
well, for you, it's going to go amazing. So don't worry about that.
We'll see.
I love your take on that because the last question that I ask all of my guests is, what do you think is the biggest modern mom problem right now? And you answered it like that. It's the availability. That is it.
It's like the expectation of it. Everyone expects you to be available 24/7. It's like, I remember, and it was so different for our parents in that I can distinctly remember moments when my mom would shut her bedroom door and say, pretend I'm not home. And it was like, we weren't even in the same house, but she was so used to being able to be doing, and she would just be in her room reading a book. but she would be like, pretend I'm not here. Do not interrupt me. And it's like, yeah, we didn't interrupt her. The
I remember that
expectation.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mom would, this sounds silly. She would go into her bedroom and like either put on makeup or like sharpen her makeup pencils or like brush her hair, like some sort of, and I'm using this in quote, self-care type of thing. That was like her thing that I would play in my room with my Barbies. But
yeah, because we all had our Barbies.
Everyone had the Barbies, but I know that was sort of like the quiet time where it was like she was doing her own thing, I was doing my own thing, and that was like from a fairly young age too. It's interesting that you were describing your mom with like a lot of enthusiasm and childlike energy, because my mom is the same way. She is like super fun, and when I was a child, like that was great because we'd go to like Action Park, or we would go. That's throwing out a New Jersey thing there.
I love the film about it. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a documentary about Action Park.
Can I actually tell you something really funny about this, Danielle? You're going to appreciate this. There are 2 films about Action Park. There's the one that you're referring. There is a sort of pre-documentary about it that I am in. I was I was interviewed in, and so Seth Porges, who is the creator of the one that you're referencing, the big one that everyone's seen on HBO, he was tapped after people saw his first initial video that he did for Daily Motion, and then they were like, "Here's a big bucket of money, do like a full-blown documentary," and that's the one that was for HBO. But I was actually in the one that was the precursor to that.
Wow, I would love to see it.
I will send it to you.
Please do.
I will. I will. I think it's still on YouTube, like under the Daily Motion account. But yeah, that's really funny. So I don't know where I was going. So Action Park. I'm like, what were we even talking about?
Our moms and childlike energy.
Our minds, our moms. Like my mom would be like, "Hey, let's go to the beach. Hey, let's go to Action Park. Hey, let's go do fun stuff." And we did, and that was amazing. But then also it was like, where did I put my keys? Where were my sunglasses? You know, all of that kind of stuff.
Like the more I know about ADHD, the more I argue with my dad about him giving my mom a hard time about losing her keys. And I'm like, you've been married to her for 45 years. You could adjust. Like, you could be the one who's just nice about it.
Right.
Yeah. But it's like, you do notice all the things. And even like her sort of refusal to read details. Like, I sent her a text. I'm going on this work trip in a couple weeks to Washington State. And I decided I want to go to the Oregon coast for a few days. And it's right around my 40th birthday. So I texted my mom and I was like, do you want to come out and do this for 4 days? And I was like, I'll be out there for work. I gave her all the details. I got a text back that just said, "Oh, I've never been to the Oregon coast. I want to go. Should we look at flights?" And I'm like, you didn't even read the text. I said, well, like, she's like, should I fly from New York with you? Should I? And I'm like, no, like, these are the dates. You're not coming on my work trip with me. You're invited on the weekend fire with me. But it's sort of like understanding ADHD so much has given me this much better understanding of my mom, and also understanding that hers is 100% not treated. And so like some of the emotional stuff, I'm like, I think I can show my mom a lot more grace is sort of how I've started to think about it. Cause I'm like, okay, the same way that I would show a child with ADHD who doesn't know what they're doing and hasn't been treated yet. And I wonder I meant to say this earlier, when you said like for your son, like the diagnosis was like right on the cusp. I wonder if that has to do with having a mom who's aware of your own ADHD and then raising him with that awareness of how brains can be different, and like maybe not having as much of a critical environment for him. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's certain things with ADHD where it's like, what does meet the clinical threshold? But there's one doctor who refers to it as a trait, that there's a trait and a disorder. And he's sort of like, the trait wouldn't qualify as the disorder, but we still refer to it as an ADHD brain because it's clearly still got a lot of those characteristics. Yeah.
Yes. We're very psychologically minded in our house. Obviously, what I do for work, I read like every book that people send me, talk to like every parenting expert, every expert out there. My husband is also a physician too. So we're very psychologically minded. And with my son, like I said, he had like full-blown neuropsych exam. And at that particular practice, they said, we're not going to say that's what it is. But they also gave the caveat of maybe if this was a different doctor, yes, it would have qualified. So that goes back to what you were saying about the trait and the characteristic. So
Yep.
It was a little subjective there, which is interesting because normally in science, it's not as subjective as you think that
It's not
it
as
is.
subjective. Yeah. And that actually, the last episode of the podcast was extremely interesting to work on. I worked on it while I was doing IVF, and the entire episode is about hormones and their impact on ADHD. So to know that I was taking these like huge hormone fluctuating injections, I was like, this is really something. And where I was going with this is just that for a ton of women, they're sort of also at that cusp before they hit perimenopause and menopause. And we're just starting to see the research that says like it can tip you, but it doesn't mean the symptoms weren't, the potential for them wasn't there before. And I even get tripped up in how I talk about it because it's all, but the science is starting to catch up. And yeah.
I'm grateful that it is. I'm grateful that the science is starting to catch up with the experiences of millions of people across the world. So no, that is absolutely what we're hoping for. And it will help for future generations, babies that are not yet born and all of that. So very grateful for that. Danielle Elliot, tell us where we can listen to the show, where we could watch your work. You are extraordinarily talented documentarian. You are. I mean, I think it's funny that we brought up the Action Park documentary. You had nothing to do with that one, but I know that documentaries hold a special place in your heart. So tell everybody where we could find you and where we could watch your work.
Yeah. So my current work is a series called Climbing the Walls. It's on Understood, or it's with understood.org, and you can find it anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. My other work is I'm wrapping up a series right now that'll be on ESPN. It follows 3 of the best women's college basketball players in the country. So completely different than a podcast investigating ADHD in women. And then I'm also working on another true crime podcast right now. So you can probably see the ADHD and how it expresses in my work. Yeah. So all different things all the time. And then one of my most recent pieces that I've written was in The Guardian a few months ago. So
awesome. I'll link it in the show notes.
Thank
the Guardian
you.
article.
That would be great. Yeah. And then you can find me. I'm on Instagram as Danielle.Elliot. I think that's the only platform I'm still on, really.
That's cool. Yeah.
But that's it.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing about your journey and about ADHD and about the podcast. I want everyone to check it out. And by the time that this airs, all 6 episodes will be live and for your listening pleasure. Listening pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you could head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow, or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.